Morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to welcome you to the conversation today, which is co-convened by the Catalyzing Strengthened Policy Action for Healthy Diets and Resilience Project, better known as Cascade. The purpose of this conversation is to explore the intersection of women's empowerment and food security, highlighting approaches to improving nutrition and building resilience for women of reproductive age and children. We know that food insecurity disproportionately affects women and girls globally, with significant implications for maternal and child nutrition, despite them being primary food producers in many regions. The panel will demonstrate how empowering women catalyzes sustainable improvements in family and community nutrition. The experts will further highlight opportunities for policy improvement and the potential impact of better nutrition integration at all levels of society. Therefore, in this webinar, we would like comments and critiques. Everyone is encouraged to post any questions in the Q&A box, and we will answer them in the discussion later in the session. Some of you are joining late in your time zones, and the session is being recorded. So feel free if you need to leave early or to leave a question or comment in the Q&A function. The link of the event page where the recording will sit will now be pasted in the chat box. In this session, we will have live interpretation for French and Portuguese. The instructions for how to access the interpretation functionality will now be pasted in the chat box. So now I'd like to start off with our first question and our first panelist. We will start by examining social norms and systematic challenges that limit women's access to nutritious food and agricultural resources. Our first speaker will give a summary of high-level findings of the gender analysis in her country and how these impact on cascade nutrition outcomes on women's access to nutritious food. So let me introduce Daisy Yosa. She is a development practitioner and program management specialist with a passion for women and girls' rights activism. She has more than 15 years of experience in non-governmental organization project and program management work focused on advocacy with grassroots and national women's rights organizations in Uganda, as well as international organizations, notably HIVOS East Africa and CARE International in Uganda. Daisy, can you please take us through the gender analysis and the impact of this on Cascade's nutrition outcomes in Uganda?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon to each and everyone on the call from whichever part of the globe that we are attending this webinar. As introduced, I'm Yosa Daisy Immaculate. I'm the Cascade Uganda Consortium Manager. And as Cascade, central to the work that we do is ensuring that women as well as girls are empowered, but most importantly, they are able to achieve and fulfill their rights to a healthy life through food. Cascade in Uganda in 2023 conducted a gender analysis through our partner, Chambugo University. And part of the findings that the gender analysis revealed, one was that there were high levels of disproportionate discrimination among women as well as children when it comes to food and nutrition security. We established that there exist various gender and social norms that affect the nutrition of women as well as children. Up to 26% of women are disproportionately affected compared to men, and specifically looking at norms that limit the intake or the consumption of diverse and nutrient-dense foods. It was established that there are norms that are prevalent that limit women from consuming animal-sourced foods. So while the study established that women are able to consume foods that are rich in starch and carbohydrates like root tubers, cassava, yams, and all the whole range of carbs or carbohydrates, there was a disproportionate number of women who are stopped because of norms that discriminate and oppress and do not allow them to consume animal sourced foods, namely eggs, fish, chicken. And these norms were prevalent in a number of the regions where the study was conducted. And then two, we also established that when it comes to women's leadership, in a number of women's groups where women should be able to voice and speak about issues that pertain to nutrition, they are also limited, with men taking center stage in number of these spaces where women ideally should be able to speak up on aspects of food production. Thirdly, when it comes to key resources that women need to be able to produce the food that they need, because socially women have been ascribed to be the food providers. And yet the study revealed that even while they are expected to be food providers, they do not have access to critical resources such as land. Up to 80% of the land is owned by men, and women can only access. And yet when it comes to deciding on what to produce, what to grow on this land, they are not allowed to grow whichever foods they feel are right for the nutrition of their families, while there's a high preference by men who own the land to grow the cash crops as opposed to the food crops. And yet they are expected to put food on the table. And as a result of this, women are not able to have readily accessible foods that they need. And yet we do know our women, by our biology, especially women of reproductive age, need to eat a wide variety of nutrient-dense foods. And what we see as a correlation in terms of effects of this has been, we have high levels of anemia that women suffer from, which is leading to death of women during childbirth. And of course, we see high levels of stunting among children, because children under the age of 2 rely so much of their food nutrients from their mothers. And if mothers are not at liberty to be able to grow the foods they know are good and nutritious for their children, then it also affects the growth and nutrition of their children as well. So these were some of the critical findings that were established from the gender analysis that was conducted across 6 regions in Uganda. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you so much for sharing and your in-depth findings about the situation and the context in Uganda. Now I'd like to hear a little bit more about the work that you do based on your expertise. So curious to hear more about community-led solutions. You know, we've heard about these systemic challenges and the social norms. There's really a lot that you've mentioned, but how do we address this at the community level?
Yeah. Thank you very much. When we conducted the gender analysis in Uganda, this was complemented by what we call a social norms exploration study. And the gist of the social norms exploration is to find out who are the gatekeepers and who are the influencers who can shift the negative norms and promote the positive norms that we need to promote if we are to reverse the situation. And what we did, we had a number of consultative meetings at community level, particularly targeting the woman as well as children in schools, but overall community groups, to find out from them who do they identify as critical influencers who are in position to shift the norms. And a number of community influencers, individuals were identified. And these include community development officers, religious leaders, cultural leaders, elderly women, teachers, health assistants as critical influencers. And guided by the information that we were given during the gender analysis, we constituted a number of what we call reference groups. And this was because they were identified as key influencers. These are over 700 individuals spread across the different regions where we're implementing Cascade in Uganda. And what we have done is to conduct a number of what we call gender transformative approaches, because we feel and we strongly believe that if we are going to uproot and dismantle the negative norms that are prevalent, are diverse in these communities, it's important to utilize what we call gender transformative approaches. So we trained over 700 individuals in social norms and exploration to dig deep into understanding what are the drivers, where do these norms stem from, how far, and are there possibilities of uprooting? And from the understanding and appreciation and the use of the social analysis and action, we were able to empower this group of people to be able to be the frontliners in the different communities, and they've been able to reach over 5 million people in these different communities, preaching the gospel of why it is important that the rights of women to food are critical, and why it is unfounded that women are stopped from consuming animal source proteins, for example, eggs, and yet they are very healthy and nutritious. And also taking this message at the community level in their spaces where they already occupy, in churches, at health facilities, integrating the positive norms awareness into their day-to-day work in churches, in cultural meetings, in schools. And we are seeing this as a very strong message delivery through working with the community structures. And I must note, we are already receiving feedback and testimonies of changes that are happening as a result of the realization that even while these norms were there time memorial, they are being demystified, that they can be changed and they can be altered for the good of women's nutrition. But also relatedly, taking this to a notch higher, engaging at policy level, because what is very critical for the work that we do, and if we are going to have systematic change, is also challenging and influencing through the structures where this needs to be taken, punching at the level, at district level, but also national level, informing and influencing policies so that they are reinforced thereafter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing about your work, Daisy. It's really wonderful and inspiring, to hear about the different levels of work and the, how we can actually address these very deeply entrenched norms in the communities. So now I'd like to move to our next speaker. I'll introduce her first. Her name is Ella Wamamara, and she's a leading voice in advocacy for gender equality and food security in Benin. She's a passionate lawyer and social anthropologist dedicated to social justice and women's empowerment. And she's been working for over 20 years to build more inclusive food systems where every woman has access to resources, markets, and decision-making processes that shape the future of nutrition. Can we have Ella joining us? Hopefully she can put on her camera. We're seeing her. All right. Maybe we have lost her at this point. So perhaps if we don't have Ella with us at this moment, we can move on to our next speaker, in which case I will introduce Ms. Joyce Akpata, who's going to make a nice transition, speaking a little bit more about the policy dimensions of this work around women's and children's nutrition. So very happy to be joined by Joyce Akpata, who's the head of policy and advocacy at GAIN Nigeria. So Joyce is a lawyer and international development professional with a proven track record of excellence across publishing, training, and management. She has successfully led the turnaround of nonprofit membership organizations, fostering international trade, economic development, and public policy through strategic advocacy and stakeholder engagement. Her expertise spans governance, organizational development, and international trade facilitation, positioning her as a leader in driving impactful policy change. Joyce currently serves as the head of policy and advocacy at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and she leads GAIN Nigeria's broader influencing agenda, ensuring that interventions across nutrition, food security, and economic development are effectively coordinated to achieve overarching project and policy objectives, and private sector actors to drive systemic change, ensuring that food systems in Nigeria become more inclusive, sustainable, and nutrition sensitive. Joyce, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions on the extent of Cascade's engagement of women and girls in policy advocacy. My first question for you is, what has been the result towards implementation of women and girls' responsive nutrition policies?
All right, thank you, Sarah, and a pleasure to be on this call. No doubt, yeah, like the living by the name of the project, which is catalyzing, strengthening policy action for healthy diets and resilience. We have been actively engaging in policy influencing and advocacy aimed at accelerating actions at addressing systemic barriers and also promoting gender responsive policies, anchoring this very strongly on strengthened multi-stakeholder collaboration, both at national and subnational level. And a key impact we have seen is that based off of a lot of the interventions and influencing initiatives, we've seen that gender responsive strategies are now being embedded in state level multi-sectoral plans of actions for food and nutrition. And this is ensuring that both at state level and at local government level, priority is given to women-led and women-focused nutrition initiatives. Also, I mean, we've seen at subnational level, some governments committing to funding support towards nutrition programs that are targeting pregnant and lactating mothers, adolescent girls, and indeed women-led businesses. There's also increased women's participation in nutrition-sensitive agriculture through a number of interventions that have been anchored around building capacity and financial inclusion that have been implemented by Cascade, using Nigeria as an example. And I would highlight a couple of areas of engagement that we have been involved with. And I think a key one has been the National Women in Power Conference, which we had organized in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, the Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition Network, and other partners. This was a high-level advocacy event to engage female ministers, governors' wives, female legislators and commissioners, and also female leaders across the country towards improving nutrition and creating strong voices, making women as serve as agents for change within the country. And most importantly, to generate commitments and measurable actions. In terms of the call to action from that event, two key ones were around the need to empower women and girls through access to continuous education, inclusion in decision making, and economic opportunities for optimal nutrition. Also, there was a focus on the need to promote the practice of exclusive breastfeeding and adoption of 6 months paid maternity leave for working mothers. Yeah, and also, I mean, for us as Cascade, we have also leveraged on International Women's Day, I mean, just like what we're having today, as a platform to also advocate for gender responsive food and nutrition policies, to amplify women's voices and drive action on women empowerment in food systems, and also undertaking social media campaigns that are aligned with the International Women's Day global theme, basically showcasing contributions to food systems transformation. And, we have also partnered with a number of media outlets and influencers to raise awareness on gender disparities in food system, while also highlighting success stories of women who have made their mark within the food system. And I must say that, while platforms like this serve as a catalyst for advocacy and action, we continue to push for strong long-term gender inclusive policies, for funding, for structural reforms that would ensure that women's rights within the food systems are fully realized. And this has strongly been evident in, like I mentioned previously, ensuring that implementation of policies and development of multi-sectoral plans at community level has a focus on targeting smallholder female farmers in the communities, and also aiming to improve livelihoods of these women, because we do believe that that would strongly lead to increased access to healthy and nutritious food options. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joyce. That's very impressive examples that you've offered us from the Nigeria context. Just building on what you have said already, could you elaborate a little bit more on the gaps and the recommendations?
Yeah, so I mean, while we've made some progress, there's still a lot that we're able to do, and we're not resting on our oars. Funding gaps still, to a very large extent, limit the large-scale implementation of gender-focused nutrition programs. There's still a lot that can be done, and of course, we would anchor that on increased advocacy efforts and evidence-based advocacy as well, so we can flag the key issues for relevant actors to take note. We also have weak enforcement of some gender-sensitive policies. While for a couple we do have policies, but it's one thing to have the policies and for them to be implemented effectively to see the desired result. So it's important that to address some of these, we have stronger accountability frameworks, and that's what for us is a key area to also see where we are able to support relevant stakeholders, both within government and within the communities that we do engage with, to strengthen. I think Daisy had given example of some of the interventions around the social norms and improving women's ability to contribute to decision making, relating to food and nutrition issues. We do believe that once women are also more vocal and more confident and are able to assert their rights to some extent, and of course are financially stable, they are able to address some of the issues that we do see. And lastly, I would say also it's very important that that there's more evidence-based decision making and program design, because recent data has shown a decline in nutrition status of women and children. So if nothing, that in itself is a call to action. So definitely to make progress and to accelerate action towards dismantling, I would say, some of these systemic barriers that perpetuate inequality, we would have to keep advocating to ensure full policy implementation, to ensure there's a secure and sustainable financing, and indeed very robust institutionalization of gender responsive policies. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And so while we still face some significant challenges, it's really good to hear that there are concrete actions that can be taken. That's very encouraging for us.
Absolutely.
Looking forward. Thanks so much for sharing. So at this point, I'd like to transition and speak with our panelist whom I introduced earlier, but let me recap again so that everyone remembers her. I believe we now have Ella Wamamara with us. Is that right? Let's see if we can have her on the screen. Be able to join. Wonderful. Here she is. Very good. So let me introduce our panelist, our speaker. Ella Wamamara is a leading voice in advocacy for gender equality and food security in Benin. A passionate lawyer and social anthropologist dedicated to social justice and women's empowerment, she has been working for over 20 years to build more inclusive food systems where every woman has access to resources, markets, and decision-making processes that shape the future of nutrition. We're so happy to have you joining us today, Ella. And let me ask you a question. In your extensive work with communities advocating for more inclusive food systems, what approaches do you see working well to address women and girls' constraints towards achieving household nutrition? Ms. Ella, we'll need you to come off of mute so we can hear you.
Are you hearing me now?
Very good. Please proceed.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question and thanks for this opportunity to participate today in this important webinar. It's really crucial to underline the fact that women and girls are suffering from malnutrition more than men and boys. So it's important to make sure that we can work with the women and the men to make sure that we can address these gaps. Cascade is really putting in place some innovative approaches in this area to try to really target discrimination, to try to support women in these areas. And in my work, I try to really integrate intersectional approaches to target these gaps. The economic empowerment of women is a first crucial area that I work with. Professional training, participation in income generating activities, strengthening their powers to actually make decisions within their households and outside. Gender equality in terms of leadership is really crucial. Decision making, the way in which women and girls can also be involved in household finance management, and also making sure that they have the skills and the knowledge to really ensure that their family's nutrition is adapted to their needs. We need to look at the specific needs of women and girls in the local context and have an approach that can improve knowledge in terms of decision making and also really enforce and include the issue of overall knowledge sharing on a day-to-day level. How can we make sure that this takes place in the domestic sphere and also in the public sphere? It's really important to involve men and community leaders in this work, make sure that social norms are being questioned, and making sure that we can have an impact across the board, working with men to make sure that they are able to participate in this work and support this change, and also ensure that power dynamics, particularly unequal power dynamics, are addressed. We need to ensure that family nutrition takes into account this gender component so that we can really get women's voices heard within the domestic sphere and outside. It's really important to include this in our initiatives when it comes to broader policies. We've got an overall monitoring and evaluation system that makes sure that we are able to track our interventions and their results. Within the Cascade programme, we're trying to address barriers such as limited access to education and quality health care. We're looking at how improving some of these areas, particularly at family level, can increase our work on gender norms in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ella. It was wonderful to hear from you and get a flavor of the community level activism that you are so passionate about and so successful in. And that actually provides a perfect bridge into our next question. And I'd like to ask this actually of all three of our speakers so that we can have a little bit of engagement. So just a reminder to those attendees, please interact with the conversation in the chat. Please add questions, and we'll be coming to your questions just after this last exchange. So the question I'd like to ask around is building on that conversation about the societal norms and their effect on nutrition of women and children, and community interventions that are working, policy gaps and recommendations. So one of the topics that Ms. Ella raised was about engaging men. So let me ask specifically about within Cascade, the engaging men approach, in which we work with men to shift beliefs, behaviors, and practices at household level and community level in support of women and family nutrition and ending gender-based violence. So for each of the panelists, let me start with Daisy and then go on to Ms. Ella and then to Joyce. I'd like to ask, can you tell us about your work partnering with male allies and other power holders to address social cultural barriers that limit women's decision-making power and resource control, which are necessary for achieving optimal nutrition for women and their households? So first, over to you, Daisy.
Thank you so much, Sarah. First of all, we must recognize in most of our societies the way we have been socialized right from birth in a number of communities. Is society gives boys and men a lot of power to decide, to assign resources. They are in critical spaces of influence, which unfortunately women do not have and girls do not have at a very young age, and yet we recognize that is the foundation of our confidence and also influencing a number of spaces. And as a project, we recognize that men inadvertently have become gatekeepers of these social and negative norms, because everyone loves power, everyone wants control. So bringing men and boys is very, very critical. And we are doing that through having allies in boys in schools where we're working, having conversations on what is right, what is wrong, why do you consider this right and why do you consider it wrong, by giving practical examples of their sisters and their mothers and examples they live with day to day. So having boy champions for gender equality, boy champions of dismantling negative norms in schools has been one of a working strategy that we have used in Uganda that we know is very critical in changing these norms right from the young age, because once we get to the adult age, it becomes a little hard, like the whole adage of you can't bend a tree when it's all grown, it will break. So men as allies, we are using the role model men approach, but also boys approach. So at community level, we are using men as allies in community transformation. Among the biggest percentage of our reference groups individuals who are cultural leaders and religious leaders and even village health teams individuals, these are men. So we have about 50% of our influencers, of our trailblazers who should be at the fore of changing these norms as men, because we have established that men listen more to men. So if a man is speaking to a fellow man, there's a high uptake of the message to realize that, okay, if my neighbor who is a man can do it, if a man is helping out with work at home with house chores, then it's possible for me to, also do the same. And they are seeing the advantages of this, coming and very apparent. So we are having critical topics, of course, with men. So engaging men at community level so that they have conversations with their fellow men, but also at the policy level, engaging men to be the front runners of the change we want to see, because they're able to speak, but also relying more on those practical examples is something that we recognize. So multi-pronged approaches are very, very critical, but if we are going to challenge and shift norms, definitely having boys at that age, but also men at that level, being able to have them as good examples to other men. We see that as a very good approach that is yielding results in the different communities where we are engaging. So those are the ways in which we are engaging them as reference groups, as policy influencers, but also through getting them to realize that while policies are there, how do we have them also be front runners in the implementation of these policies? As already Joyce has indicated, having the policies is one thing, but getting them to be implemented and having men as front runners. So engaging men is one recommended strategy and approach that we recommend over and over again, because culture is deep-rooted. It's been there time immemorial, and like I've already indicated, they are gatekeepers. They want to hold on to their power and the influence that comes with it. And we are saying, you know, we are pushing out a clear message that we want these spaces to be shared. We want roles to be shared. For nutrition especially, if women continue to shoulder a burden of unpaid care work, it means other things fall off. They are not able to participate in leadership. They are not able to be in other productive work, which can bring in income and enhance their resilience. So we are having those deep conversations with clear messages that, you know, we need men on our side. We don't need men as opponents. The space is enough for all of us. So let's share more, and so that we achieve the equality and equity that we feel will make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to hear from you, Daisy, about how we can engage men and really, you know, strengthen everyone, you know, from engaging men as well as women and boys, and how multiple strategies are needed, you know, in engaging at different levels. So I'd like to go over to you now, Miss Ella, to hear what you can add to this conversation, to hear a little bit more from perspective in Benin.
Merci, merci à Daisy.
Thank you, and thank you, Daisy. I have to recognize that in the private sector, we do recognize that social and cultural barriers limiting decision-making power and also the control of the resources by women requires clearly an active involvement of our men and male allies. So what does that mean? We have in our strategies to include men. So we need transformative gender strategies. You know, discrimination is everywhere, and it has an impact on nutrition, of course, but also on the capacity of women to generate revenue and control even just the household revenue. So the Cascade Project does recognize that equality for women, including on the financial side, it's absolutely essential to ensure a better nutrition for everyone in a household. We do cooperate with companies to develop as well policies in the private sector with trainings on leadership for women, but also advocacy work with women, with men, so that they become not opponents, not just allies, but active allies. It's very important to understand that they have to act. We need them in the approach. And all these initiatives encourage managers, every man working in the private sector to realize that women have their role to play in the society, in the professional world, but also in the personal world. And I've actually worked also on positive masculinity. This is also a very interesting concept because you need a shift in the mindset for real progress. And that's what Cascade is doing, working with men. We also work with role models so that they understand how toxic sometimes masculinity can be for everyone, and what is the interaction between this toxic masculinity and poverty. And I think it's essential to understand this dynamic. I actually remember that in a recent meeting, we could really see that men were kind of like, oh, well, yeah, I never realized that. You know, sometimes they're just never told. Sometimes they just simply don't realize. They're just kind of born in societies where they have these rights and they just assume that's the way it is. And sometimes to challenge things, it's not that easy. So it has to start somewhere. And I believe that we need clear strategies with partnerships between the public and private sector to have this shift in social norms. We need to raise awareness. We need to involve as well consumers, clients, because clients are also women, correct? So they also have their word, they also make a choice. So we need to challenge stereotypes and understand what could be the benefits for women if they were contributing more in the professional area, but also at home. We also encourage to a better control by women of their own resources. We talk about financing, a better education on financing for women. We, there again, involve men. We know that it's very important for everyone, for men, but for the whole families. And to finish, I would say that the private sector also has a unique opportunity to really encourage social change by having more inclusive companies, but also by inducing a change in the society so that women have a better control on their choices. We say in Benin that a man of quality, he's not scared of equality. And I think that's important because, for food safety and nutrition, it's essential for women, but also for the whole family. Thank you.
Ella, for giving us some insights into how actually policies within a company can have an impact and how this can have, societal implications, which also have economic benefits for the entire society. I think these are really important points you're raising. So I'd like to now give the floor to Joyce to speak a bit about the same.
All right, thanks a lot, Sarah. And Daisy and Ella have really captured the key areas because, definitely when engaging men, we don't see them as just participants, but these are allies, yeah? And what we try to do deliberately is raising he for she's, within the various men groups that we have to engage with. And from the perspective or angle of policy, if I use, for instance, the legislature as an example, over almost 90% are men. So you can't run away from engaging men, but is to be very strategic about the engagement. And in being strategic, it's important that, we do show men that, gender equality is not a women's issue. So partners and men must be partners. They must be advocates to help drive the change that we need to see. And when we do engage in, say, capacity building or trainings on gender responsive policy making for stakeholders, it's not focused on women, because indeed is everyone's problem, so we do have men in such sessions so that they do have a better understanding, they do have a better appreciation of the issues. And also importantly is encouraging men, to also sponsor women into leadership position across government and across private sector as well. That's something that's very critical. In engaging with men, some of the things that I try to make them understand is that, look, women, based on traditional roles, do a lot of unpaid work, so your only way of paying her back, it's helping or supporting in making her strong, making her independent, and that's very, very critical. You also want a woman to be able to contribute her own bit, because there's so much that women bring to the table. And if we do not amplify that, then people do not see the benefits that do come. And indeed, I would believe there have been quite a number of research that has shown that with increased participation and opportunities given to women, especially within the food systems and agricultural systems, there would be enhanced food security, there would be improved nutrition, because women, to a very large extent, determine what is consumed within the household. And you can be very sure that an empowered woman would want a healthy household. Yeah, nobody wants to be grappling with the challenges of malnutrition as a woman, because that also has its negative impact on your time, on your personal development. So we are invested in this, and we as women have a role in driving economic growth, and it would require collective action because we all get collective benefits. So it's not a burden that one gender, just the women, should carry, but to also have a lot of male feminists, as I'll call them, to also continue to drive the agenda. But information is very, very critical. Enlightenment, awareness, so there is a greater appreciation of these issues. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Joyce, for highlighting how important bringing awareness to these issues are, and framing it as a mutual interest, and the importance of male allies who can play such a critical role in creating space for women leaders to really change the situation in terms of food security for the whole of our societies. So I'm super excited to see so much engagement in the chat. We have a lot of experts in the participants as well. Very good to have everyone's presence and active participation. And we have a number of questions that have come up for the panel. So I'd like to transition now and take some audience questions. So I'm wondering, is Ms. Ella still with us? Can we also throw questions to all three panelists? Can you join us? Wonderful. Good to have you back. So for the first question from the audience, our participant has asked, according to many studies, women working in food systems supply chain often get penalized with lack of access to land ownership and credit from banks. And this seems to be stubbornly entrenched in some countries. Could you expand on this and how concretely we can overcome this challenge? So I'd like to see, Ms. Ella, would you have something to say about this question in terms of women working in food system supply chain and being penalized with lack of access to land ownership and credit, and how we can overcome this kind of challenge?
Merci pour cette
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, as I explained before, it is really important to work on this issue of access for women to resources. This is part of our work. We try to collaborate a lot with institutions, financial institutions, and also with enterprises and production cooperatives to try to really work on strengthening decision-making capacities and this access element. It's really important to stress that when a woman has this kind of access and this independence, she can really increase her work and her contribution to these supply chains and to the sector in general. We're trying to work with these various links in the chain to reinforce and strengthen the leadership of women. And we are really trying to deconstruct the status quo, the obstacles that actually create this lack of access. So how can we develop things within these networks to ensure that women can participate in an equitable fashion in food systems? How do the networks need to be changed? And we need to work with our male allies on this as well. We're working with boys at the moment to try to really discuss some of these ideas and to make lasting results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ella, and thank you for making that link back to household level, diets, healthy diets, and consumption of good food for nutrition, which is where really everything starts. So for our second question, I'd like to hear a little bit more about, let's see, let me just frame the question from our audience. Many successful initiatives remain localized or donor dependent. Based on what you've seen in Cascade and beyond, what do you believe is the game changer for scaling gender transformative approaches in food security? And what would it take to make these models self-sustaining? And for this, maybe I can ask Daisy to kick us off, and maybe Joyce, you can also come in on the policy angle.
Thank you very much, Sarah, moderator. Indeed, when you look at the food system and what it requires for it to be functional and to work for women, there are a number of drivers as well as a number of barriers, and gender is at the center of it all, because there is no food system essentially without women, and yet what we see, some systems and structures sadly further entrench that discrimination. And what we feel is very, very core is gender needs to be integrated in every action that is taken at the different levels, right from the household to policy, beyond policy to practice. It is very, very important. And we believe that is a game changer. We need to get to a point whereby every person recognizes that for the food system to thrive, for the food system to function, for 80% of the users and contributors to the food system, it must work for them. So it starts from the appreciation that gender is central in everything that we do. How do we get women in these spaces? And after getting women in these spaces, how do we give them the tools that they need? The tools include the voice. How are we building their capacities at the different levels? So that once it starts from the women being able to appreciate the critical role they play, they will be given the ability and the capacity to speak while other people also add their voices to them. So gender integration at different levels. How do we interest our donors to recognize that we may come up with beautiful policies, we want to put money, but there is a benefit if you put money where gender is. There is a benefit, there is a return on investment if a woman is put at the center of all food system intervention. So that is very key. But I also would like to flag one thing as I wind up, that when it comes to engaging on our challenges, especially women face in access to resources, what we need to do and what we are doing as a project, but what I would recommend that other people, we need to start having conversations with financial institutions. They need to understand that you cannot have the same criteria and threshold of accessing credit for all. We need to appreciate that women experience different barriers. They do not have land titles. They may not even have access. They may not have even the money that is required to fund, to match whatever facility they need. So how do they develop facilities that conform and meet and are more close to the realities, of the women, so that they're able to access? Otherwise, they will continue to be deterred or barred rather from attaining resources that are especially land. So can we design facilities, credit facilities that more align to the realities of the women? Because what we see right now, most of them are not aligned and they are kept out of this, of the food system and also playing that critical role. So they continue to get really little from the so much that they put in. Yeah, so it's let's gender be centered in every action that is taken at different levels. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Joyce, would you have anything to just add on that level?
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt we need to think of sustainable means of addressing some of these gaps, because it can't ultimately be dependent on donor funding. So there has to be deliberate action locally, and some of this would definitely include very, very rigorous reforms, using land, for instance, as an example. There has to be law reforms that ensure that women have access to land ownership. I believe, if I recall, I'd read that somewhere in Rwanda also that has been done. So it's a very key area that we need to see. And definitely also in terms of budgetary allocation by government, in terms of gender inclusive programming, those are key areas. In Nigeria, I know we have had a couple of interventions that in the past have focused on areas that are meant to provide enhanced access to financing or credit financing for women. So, programs like that being institutionalized in a very sustainable manner, it's very, very critical. for private sector, there has to be market-driven solutions as well that would encourage more gender-lens investing, prioritizing women-led businesses, providing incentives that definitely would appeal to females, like Daisy had said. And lastly, it to be around, I would think, models that community-led, because again, some of what we do with the SAA for Cascade would help in strengthening community-led models that would support women. And these could be perhaps by way of cooperatives, and business associations that are supported by women for women, or men for women as well, but basically something that can support women at community level, like the village savings and loan schemes that we see operational in some countries as well. That's very, very critical. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think at this point, we should wrap up our webinar because we're at time. So I wanted to just thank everyone so much. There's so many things to summarize from today, including, the role of men and boys, including power relations, and how this all ties back to diets and nutrition at the household level. We've heard from the community perspective, we've heard from private sector perspective, and we have heard from policy standpoint. So I wanted to thank you so much for all of the perspectives that have been shared today. Thank you to all of our speakers, Daisy, Ella, and Joyce. And let me thank also the participants for your active engagement and your questions. So with this, we will wrap up the webinar, and wishing you all a very good International Women's Day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Merci à tout le monde. Au revoir. Merci à la modératrice.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, moderator. See you soon.